financial literacy, and the human condition. Welcome to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam.
Right? It's a lot easier to get people on the same page when they're able to understand their own values. And then, because people often find we do have overlapping values, even though we hate each other right now. We got a reason, and there are often some shared values.
That sounds a lot like the political argument you brought up earlier. Hi, it's Francis. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for watching this video. If you're catching us on YouTube, please help us help others by clicking like, subscribe, and all notifications so you don't miss any videos. And check back for the next video. I think you're going to love it. Thanks again. For more information, you can visit us at hugyourmoney.com.
Welcome to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam. Hi.
Hi, Jess. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really good. And this week we have another guest.
We do. Today we're joined by somebody whose work has to do with what I call that love-hate relationship with money. Joyce Slabaugh is a licensed therapist, a former CFP, that's Certified Financial Planner to the rest of us, and the creator of something called Relational Wealth Framework. She's helped ultra-high net worth families and everyday folks to understand their emotional root of the financial decisions they make. And she describes her work as living at the intersection of wealth, well-being, and impact. So we're really glad she's here with us today. So welcome to the show, Joy.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate you all having me.
Our pleasure. I'd like to start in right at the heart of it and say, what the heck is Relational Wealth Framework? Can you explain what that means and what prompted you to create that?
Absolutely. So it's really about our relationship with money, realizing that for all of us, money has more meaning than just currency. Yes, it allows us to buy food and pay our bills, and also it means so much more. And yet many times we don't really understand the meaning that money has to us. And that's what can then lead to all of this friction that we might feel internally about money, as well as externally in relationship with other humans, be it a partner, a child, a parent, a work colleague. Money is involved in so many of our relationships in life. I'm really fascinated by this because as a financial planner, I worked with people who had lots of money and yet were really unhappy. They would have, I'd see the way money would just blow up relationships in their life. As a therapist, I wasn't expecting to talk about money, and yet money would come up. And so I realized there's really this opportunity to focus on the intersection of the way money and emotions, how it impacts us and our relationships with others. There's an opportunity to focus on this and help people understand really what money means to them and how they can then bring it in alignment with their values so that they can live a life that is peaceful, that is connected, that has meaningful impact and allows them to leave a legacy.
When you say help them align that with their values, can you give me some examples?
So I'm going to sort of amalgamate different situations so that nothing's identifiable. So one example would be someone who is very successful. They built a business that was worth a lot of money. And they woke up though and realized their relationships were in shambles. And they were in the middle of getting a divorce. And they realized, they started to question, well, am I actually successful? I have 8, 9 figures in wealth, and yet no one is still in my life if I'm not paying them. And so that would be an example of where they're starting to realize their values. They actually do value relationships, but they're not living their life like that, right? They're investing everything in building financial success at the expense of relationships. And so with folks like that, then helping them understand these values and untangle what's keeping them from actually living their life in alignment with the way they want to. And then they can bring it in alignment, repair relationships, and actually use their wealth to really bring to life their values. So that, because wealth can be a great tool for investing in relationships, can also destroy relationships, right? It depends on how we use it. So I would give that as an example.
That's a great example. Actually, we talk about financial stress, and it's often not really about the money, the actual money itself, right?
Absolutely. Right. I mean, I feel like there's an arc people go through depending on where they are on the socioeconomic scale. When they don't have much money, we see money as, wow, money will solve all my problems. And then when you have money, you realize, okay, it solved some problems, but it also created a whole new set of problems. And so really money isn't so much the problem as much as how we relate to it, the meaning we assign to it, and then the way that meaning influences our behavior.
I couldn't agree with you more in talking about how people with, great wealth and people with no money often experience the very similar kind of emotional stress. And you do think I've been in both places, right? When you have no money, you think, man, if I just could get to this level where I could pay my bills and not stress about it, life would be good. Do you find a difference in teaching young people about money? And do you work with many young people now?
Yeah, there does seem like there are some generational values around money where that influence people's relationship with money. Because let's be honest, we have all these cultural influences that impact how we think about money, as well as family influences and a lot of things that influence our ideas around money and relationship with money. And I do think that there are generational aspects as well. I mean, think back to, World War II, the greatest generation, right? Their attitudes were toward money were like frugal. And then as we advance different generations, there are different ideas around it. And I think we're starting to see now the younger generation is rethinking their relationship with money in ways that are sometimes uncomfortable for older generations. And yet, what I really try to encourage people is that there isn't a right or wrong way to think about money. And it's not like there are good and bad beliefs around money. It's more about understanding what your values are and what works for you. And then how do you bring your money in alignment with your values? Now, I really do believe that as we help people explore their relationship with money and bring their life in alignment with this, then we do see transformation, that people have experienced less stress, they experience more connection in their relationships, and there's like a ripple effect as you transform one person's relationship with money, this ripple effect that goes out and impacts the other people in their life, their community, and even the broader world.
What I find is that most couples, maybe it's the opposites attract thing. I don't know. You're probably going to be able to tell us. But most couples, one person is sort of the steward of household finances. They're the one who gets the bills and makes sure the kids can go to soccer camp and they get the groceries done, et cetera. And the other person is usually more content to let one person do that. And they maybe earn more money or hand over a paycheck, or they contribute in some other way to the marriage. They see their value as something different in that partnership. And everything seems okay as long as there is enough money. But when a stressor is introduced, they go to the other partner and they say, oh my gosh, we need to talk about money. And the sparks just fly. And that's when it gets really ugly, because the person who's been sort of not participating can't solve it either. And they're coming from behind. They have no idea what the situation is like. And the fixer is feeling, I think, and again, I'm going to defer to you, but I think the fixer is feeling like, wait a minute, this was part of my value in the relationship, and I'm now failing at it for some reason. And worse, I have to come clean and talk to my partner about it. Can you tell me if I'm close and why this happens?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that dynamic. And what's really interesting about it is, and you see other dynamics in partnerships as well, right? Money is a really hot one though. And in the dynamic that you describe, a lot of times what's happening for the person who's the fixer is shame. That's their job, that's the value they bring to the relationship is shame. And when this problem comes up and they can't solve it, they feel this shame. And humans go to enormous lengths to avoid feeling shame. It's a very powerful emotion. And so, they're feeling shame. They may not recognize it. They may not be able to identify it. And so there are all these other feelings that are coming into play to distract them from that. And that's then what can often lead to the tension, the friction, the fight. And so then you have the person who's not been as involved in the money. There's now this problem. This can often bring up shame in them as well, of like, well, I don't know how to fix this. And I don't know what's been happening with the money. Should I have been? Am I a bad person because I did delegate this? And again, we don't like feeling shame. So then these other emotions can come in, and that's where the accusing can come in about like, well, you said you were going to handle it. And I was like, well, I was trying, right? And that's how you then get into like the fights are often more surface level emotions, and underneath many times are two people who are both scared and dealing with shame. And it's really hard to face that within themselves, much less reveal that to their partner. And so the fight isn't usually actually about money. It's actually about, I'm afraid and I'm ashamed and I don't know how to be with these emotions.
Yeah. And they often don't have the skill set to solve the problem. I mean, we're not educating people about money in the way that we should. And what are the top three causes of divorce, right? Money, infidelity, and sloppiness. Pick up your socks, right? So, yeah, just, will you weigh in on this? What are your thoughts?
Just going back to something you said in the beginning, I don't know if you guys know who Dak Shepard is. He has a podcast and he talks about this. He said, he grew up in Detroit and he thought like all his problems would be solved if he just got money. And so eventually he got like a big paycheck for a movie, was on the set, had a bunch of money, and still felt like the lowest he'd ever felt. But the thing that I think is interesting that he said that you guys didn't mention, which I love, is that he was lucky enough to find that out for himself. Like, you don't believe that. Like, I hear what you guys are saying, but when you don't have money and you hear someone say, well, they've got other problems, no one cares, I think. So it was interesting that I just liked what he had to say about it, that he was lucky enough to find out he had both the poor and the rich side of it. And
Can I add on to that?
yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So what's something that's really been interesting about my experience, I was born into a family that was quite poor. And then when I became a financial advisor and I was working for very well with and for very wealthy people, getting to see these vast sums of wealth, I call it being a class traveler because you're traveling between classes and you get sometimes an outsider's perspective that you can see things maybe a little bit differently than when you grow up in it. And it is really interesting what you talk about, right? That it sometimes is hard to believe. Like, what do you mean these are problems? I remember the first time when a client was complaining to me about the $600,000 tax bill they needed to pay. And I was just like, this is a great problem to have. But that's from, my perspective coming from someone who was born into poverty. Yet when you put yourself in the shoes of people who are in that situation, it's, wait, I've worked really hard for this money. Now I have to pay it. And it's being used maybe in ways that I don't agree with, but I don't have choice in that. And so there is this feeling of, sometimes there's a feeling of like out of control, that I don't get to control this. I worked hard for this money. I don't get to control it. And that can be really incredibly uncomfortable for people. And even like the values misalignment of, I don't know anyone who agrees 100% with how the government spends money. So like everyone I know has some beef with where their taxes are paid, regardless of which side it is, right? And so for some people, there's a really intense conflict about that, and that they feel really uncomfortable with that. And so again, yes, I understand when we don't have money. It's like, again, I would love to have that problem. Yes, but it is not as easy a problem as you may think. Or when you feel like everyone in your life sees you as an ATM. Like, who wants that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can you really trust relationships when you're like, is it me or is it my money that they want to be friends with?
Yeah.
But remember, so you'd have enough money to pay a therapist then. Otherwise, you're worried if your lights are getting turned off. So,
But I agree. Problems are problems. It doesn't matter what level of money you have. Some people right now with a lot of money are just worried about, are they losing their money, right? Mm-hmm. What's happening, or is it doing really well and they don't know why? There's so many things. Our relationship with money is a difficult one, and as I said, it may be a love-hate relationship. But I'd love to get a lot more information from you if you'll share it with us, Joy. We must be at break time, I think.
We are. Can I get your phone number for you, Frances?
Of course. It's 413-773-3333.
And you can go to hugyourmoney.com. We'll be back with part 2 of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Frances Ram on WHMP.
Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor is underwritten by Franklin County Technical School. We build futures. Visit fcts.us or call 413-863-9561.
Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler, along with the money doctor, Dr. Francis Ram. Hi.
Hi, Jess. We're
and
back
another
with
great guest. Yeah, first time one this time.
We're back with Joyce Slabaugh, founder of creator of Relational Wealth Framework. I just love that title. I mean, it's pretty descriptive in itself. But we're talking about the relationship that we have with money. It might be a time for me to point out that Joy is not selling you an investment. She's not doing that work. She's working as a counselor, right, as a therapist, to help people align their wealth with their values, which, is not something most people talk about. What do they talk about? How do I make more money? Or I don't have enough to pay my bills. What do I do to fix that? Or I got a guy, he's really great. He does great in the market for me. Okay, but what does that mean in your real life? So you work with couples and families often, Joy, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask you, when it comes to values, how do you think hidden beliefs come up, they show up in relationships?
Well, you see this a lot, like in couples, for example, where there's a spender and a saver, and they love to demonize each other, right? The one who spends is like, oh, that tightwad, they won't let us spend money. And then the savers, can't stand the spending ways. You're gonna make us bankrupt. And so you see this where you end up at odds with each other. But when you really get into understanding people's values, you can see that they each are bringing value to the relationship, right? The many times the spender, when you get down to the root of it, this is a way of bringing joy into their life collectively, and it's a way of bringing newness into the relationship, which brings the dopamine hit, which is allow you to feel like you're in love with each other. And the saver is bringing stability and security and safety to the relationship. So when you can get to these underlying values, then it makes it a lot easier to be able to appreciate what the other is bringing and actually get to a place of collaboration, right? So you're shifting from, we hate each other to, oh, wait, we both are playing a really important role here. And yes, sometimes I feel irritated and I still love you and appreciate you for the way you're helping our relationship and you're investing in our relationship and financial future together.
I have a quick question for either of you, actually. Do you ever recommend, because it seems like it would be easier, that couples just keep their money separate? Because then if you have a saver or like they can do what they want. You're not mad that somebody spent $200 on video games and they're not mad you went shop. You know what I mean? Or is that just a quick fix and not really an answer to the problem?
I think we should both weigh in on that. What do you think, Joy?
Well, I do think that there is value in not making a default assumption of one way of handling money.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of value in getting clear, like before you merge finances, get really clear about what money means to each of you, what you want money to be like in your relationship. And then that helps you determine, do we actually want to merge finances? Do we want to keep them separate, or do we want some sort of hybrid, right? Where some couples would be like, we have our own money and we've aligned on how much each person contributes to a joint account that we use for our shared expenses. So being real intentional about it helps avoid a lifetime of fights.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%. Sometimes people will come to me and say, well, we keep our money very separate and I only want to talk about my debt. But my answer is sometimes a little bit different. First of all, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If this is working for you already, let's build on that. Okay, we don't want to just start from scratch with something that might not work for you. But I do tend to explore more the reasons why they're doing that. Is it a trust factor? Is it that, he's never met a loan he didn't like, and I'm not going down the rabbit hole with him? Or is it that, she's got a shopping problem? I'm being very, gender specific here. I don't mean to be, but it could be either way, that one partner doesn't trust what the other partner will do with money. And I tend to try and talk to partners about this in a way that, look, you married, you came together, or you're partnered together in many ways. You make your decisions about rearing children, about your job changes, all of that together. But when it comes to money, you keep it very separate. Let's figure out why you're keeping it separate and then decide if that is, in fact, the most useful and productive way for you to move forward. Or where we usually land is right what Joy said, some blend of it. Like, okay, so you each have debt, rather than doing this separately, if we put it in the system together, as long as you're willing to work on this together, look how much faster you get out. I liken it, when it comes to debt at least, to if I put one of you in a hole and you're jumping, trying to get out of the hole, and you're not getting very far. If I put the other one down in the hole, you can pull each other up and get out of the hole together. And for debt, in our system anyway, it's not always how it works, but within our system, when you're managing debt, working together almost always will speed things up, and you'll both come to a happier place. And when you get both partners on the same page, they're happier in general. So whatever it takes to do that, whether it's to separate some money and put some money together, whatever it takes to do that, I am in favor of, for sure.
Okay, interesting.
Great question, Jess.
And what you said about getting them on the same page, that gets to the values piece, right? It's a lot easier to get people on the same page when they're able to understand their own values. And then, because people often find we do have overlapping values, even though we hate each other right now. We got a reason, and there are often some shared values.
That sounds a lot like the political argument you brought up earlier, where, the one thing we have pulling us together is that nobody's happy about government in general. It doesn't matter who is there. Nobody's ever completely happy about it, and we can commiserate together. And it usually has something to do with money, how the government's spending our money, or what we can't get, or potholes in the road that cost so much money to fix, right? It's very interesting. I asked a question off the cuff that many people responded to in a bit of a survey that said, where do you think people turn for advice, for financial advice? And you had a very interesting answer that included all kinds of things, spiritual leaders and hairdressers. Can you elaborate on that? Where do you think people turn to for advice about money?
Yes. So when I worked for Vanguard, I led some research trying to understand referrals, what leads people to give referrals for advisors, and just understand it. And we did a bunch of ethnographic research with people, and I learned things I was very surprised by. And people have trusted advisors, and that can vary dramatically by person as to who falls in the category of trusted advisor. And they tend to go to these trusted advisors for advice on many topics, including financial advice. Like, hey, I need a financial person. Like, who should I go to? And hairdressers came up way higher than I would have thought as the go-to. Yes, and it blew my mind.
Well, I think that might have something to do with trust.
Yes.
Those of us who go and have our hair done, we know, right? If you love your hairdresser and you trust them with your hair, I know it seems like a trivial thing if you don't have problems with your hair, but when you trust your hairdresser, you might assign some level of trust to them that is outside of their field of expertise.
There's also a dynamic of they see you at your worst. And so there's an element of to that of trust, right? Who can you trust to see you not being perfect and polished and all pulled together? And that's what really is where we feel a connection, a deep connection with people, is this is someone that I can show up for who I really am. That's what leads to trust.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Certainly that feeling of nakedness or exposure is very threatening to people, which leads me to ask you, what do you think makes it so difficult for people to reach out for help, even when they really, really need it?
Shame. I mentioned earlier that shame is a really powerful emotion, and we go to great lengths to avoid it. And people will go to extreme behavior to avoid feeling shame. And so even when we need help, the idea of facing this big feeling of shame that we have will sometimes prevent people from reaching out, unfortunately.
So that being said, Joy, what financial behavior do you think is is at the top of the list for sabotaging people's sense of peace, if you will?
Honestly, it is shaming themselves.
Shame. It's all shame.
Well, really, I think it is, because if people, you see this, Francis, you've talked to a lot of people, and you see that everyone deals with these problems. You're not alone. You're feeling scared. You're not alone. Everyone's feeling scared, right? You're feeling all these feelings that you have. You're not the only person to feel this way. And yet we think that we are, and we think there's something wrong with us because we're afraid, we're nervous, we're angry, whatever these feelings may be. And we can't tolerate that in ourselves. So what I would say for folks who want to start a shift within themselves is, so what if it is true that you are not great with money, or that you don't know anything about investing, right? Okay, you're not alone. There are a lot of people in that same boat. So that first piece of just like accepting the reality of where you are, that is the very first step you need to be able to start to take action and end up in a better place.
Yeah, I absolutely think you're right about that. You have to face it. I tell people, just when you're looking at risk of exposure or risk of anything, just decide what's the worst thing that can happen to you. And if you're okay with that, go ahead. Let's take that step. How do you think people can begin to uncover their own emotional relationship with money? Is there a question or an exercise that you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I encourage folks to do is just like go to a quiet place and maybe close your eyes and imagine in your mind a room. There's a chair in that room. You're outside the room. There's a window. You're looking in. And then imagine that there's a pile of money on that chair. And just notice, what do you feel coming up inside of you as you see that pile of money? Maybe you feel excited. Maybe you feel anxious, whatever that may be. Just notice it. And then ask that feeling, okay, I see you. Step aside, if you will. Focus on the money again. Notice what else you feel. You can keep doing this and you'll start to identify the feelings that money brings up in you. And then like that exercise alone is like, okay, you learn, you feel excited, you feel afraid. Maybe there's some other things as well. But we'll go with those two. Then you can start to, when you're engaging with money, whether you have to have a money conversation, you do balance your checkbook, or a bill comes in the mail, check in. Do I feel, where's that feeling of excitement? Where's that feeling of fear? And you'll start to notice the way these weave through your life around money. And again, this is just bringing awareness to and accepting that starts to transform the relationship with money. There's more you can do beyond that, but that's a really helpful first step that you can do on your own to start to better understand your relationship with money, that it's in the conscious realm so that you can see it and be with it.
I love that you said that. We're going to run out of time, of course, if we haven't already, but I just want to ask you one last thing. For somebody who's feeling overwhelmed, not by the math, but by fear, guilt, or shame, is what you just said their first step? Should they try that first, or is there something else you'd recommend?
For someone who's really feeling overwhelmed, that might be a bit too much for them to do on their own. If they're really deeply feeling overwhelmed, I would say reach out to someone that you trust and that can hold you with compassion, and just someone that you trust, let them know you're feeling overwhelmed and let them just be with you in that. And that it can really help to create a little more space within yourself to be with these feelings of overwhelm that you're encountering.
And we are out of time, but do you have a website, Joy, that we could get?
Yes, joyslabaugh.com, Joy, and then Slabaugh is smiles like a big, awful, ugly groundhog.
Very cute, very cute.
Frances, can we get your phone number?
Of course, it's 413-773-3333.
And you can always go to hugyourmoney.com. Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks, Joy.
We'll be back next week with another edition of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Frances Ram on WHMP.
Will you help us spread the word about financial fitness? Please like, subscribe, and choose all. Thank you.